Hi everybody.
Hello,
Hi
everybody,
everybody.
and wish everybody a very happy International Women's Day. And it's going to be a very, very interesting topical discussion with a huge number of panelists joining us from the private equity industry. So, the topic of discussion is what are the funds really doing to increase diversity within and in their portfolio companies? And let me welcome on the panel Nithya Easwaran, Nupur Garg, Padmaja Ruparel, Shashank Singh, Shivani Bhasin, Lisa Lakshi Chandramouli. Thank you so much, gentlemen and ladies, for joining us. And Shashank, I must say that you are in a very unenviable position right now, but we'll try and make it as comfortable and not give you the same treatment which some of the women may be getting, being the only one in the board seat. So, Shashank, why don't you start with first? As a senior leadership, how do you see gender diversity at this point, and what are your views from the merit perspective, not from the gender lens?
Um, Nisha, thank you so much for inviting me on this panel. I'm feeling very outnumbered, so I need everyone's support uh, to help out today. But to your question, I think Nupur sort of co-authored a report just now with BCG, which looked at the state of gender diversity within the private equity industry in India. And unsurprisingly, what the report found was that as an industry, we've done an abysmal job. It's improving, but it's very, very low. And that, frankly, is the state of the industry in India, but it's also the state of the industry globally. I don't think India is any worse, but it's also not better than the private equity industry globally. And to your question, merit versus pushing the agenda of diversity, I don't know if there's necessarily a trade-off, right? I think personally, I think you can have both, but it needs people certainly at the top of funds to have the agenda that this is something that they're serious about, put A. And B, I think it needs all firms to rethink their processes, both for hiring and retention of talented women. Frankly, the point of diversity is not just gender. That's the first lens we're taking. It's diversity along a number of different spectrum. But unless you think about it consciously and say that this is something I'm going to focus on, it doesn't move the needle. At least that's been our experience. Having said that, once you focus on it and push it, actually you get the best of both worlds. You get a more diverse firm, which leads, frankly, to a better firm, but you also can improve the standards of both investment firms as well as portfolio companies.
Right. So, Shashank, a very good overview sets the stage there. But let me come to women. And one very important point you mentioned is that this industry has done horribly when it comes to gender diversity. And that is quite visible. And it's very stark also considering that the rest of the financial services pockets have done much better, like in banks and investment banks. We've seen many women leaders and some of them extremely successful as well. Shivani, what do you think about the reasons behind it? Is there a clear bias? Tell us all.
Very, very happy, warm, Women's Day to all, and thank you, Nisha. Lovely introduction, Shashank. So I'll take the baton from there. I think one of the key issues, Nisha, is the stereotyping, right? Fund management is always perceived as tougher, intense, more competitive. And I think there are two aspects to why women, are not in greater roles at the top. One is women have stayed away, because of their own mindset, perhaps saying that they are not cut out for these fields. And that's where it's up to us, a lot of, women leaders at the top, to shatter that myth, right? In fact, numerous studies, I'm sure Nupur would have shown this in her recent study, but numerous studies have shown that, a more gender balanced decision making results in superior returns, not inferior, as Shashank said, right? In fact, IFC had a very interesting report last year, moving towards gender balance, that actually did a lot of studies saying that a more balanced decision-making team results in a 20% higher return. Also, women, ironically, while the perception is that they're not cut out for fund management, are often very good at this, very good at this job. They are able to see, risks holistically. They are able to fall less prey to ego, to confirmation bias, all of the ingredients of terrific investment judgment, all of the ingredients of working well with portfolio companies and securing good exits. So while the narrative out there is that this is perhaps something that is not cut out for women, the reality is quite the opposite.
I think all of you are exemplary in that, in decimating that particular myth, Shivani. But I asked you a pointed question, and I'll take that further to Padmaja then. Is there a clear bias, and what is the main reason?
So I think thanks Nisha and thanks IVCA for a phenomenal platform that you've created. So Nisha, to that, there was a clear bias. I think we saw more men in this business than women historically, but gradually and surely that bias is sort of getting muted, right? We are seeing more and more women coming into this business. Our very chairperson was a lady. Look at the number of people on this panel. It would have been hard to see this 6 years ago. So clearly that bias is changing, number one. Number two, I think increasingly what we've seen in the risk business, which is what private equity is about, and a little bit to what Shivani was saying, I think women are getting into it because they're being also able to add value to the discussions, to the decisions, to the diligence, to the thinking through of how you can really help build better portfolios. Third, the startup ecosystem itself, the companies that are growing right up to IPO and more are getting in. You are seeing many more women leaders, many more women founders. And it just makes sense to have a more balanced gender teams, even on the investing side. It brings in different kind of perspectives and thinking that only adds to it. Having said all of that, Nisha, to be honest, I think while we do need to have, and we for sure have, a very focused lens when we are recruiting, when we are mentoring and bringing up our teams. But the reality also still remains that, best person for the job. And that the point is that women are growing into these jobs, growing into these roles very nicely and very aggressively. So I think it's a mix of many, many reasons that we are seeing this gap sort of narrowing increasingly fast.
Right. So very positive, commentary from there, Padmaja, that yes, things are changing slowly but surely. But Nithya, one point that Padmaja made is that who's the best person for the job? Now, in taking that decision, do you think your industry has in some ways considered not just merit, but some of the other aspects related to women and specific to women while choosing the best person for the job?
I mean, I want to open this by first making a statement, and I think it's all that we all need to believe as senior leaders, and the women we hire need to believe, and the rest of the organization needs to believe. A diversity hire is not a compromise hire, and I find the person who doubts this the most is actually the woman being hired, and many times you have to actually reach out and say, just because I want to hire a woman and that's a mandate, doesn't mean it's a compromise hire. It's a mandate because we think it's good for the organization. I'll go back to your, other question. There is a bias, and conscious and unconscious. I would say a lot more unconscious now that we need to break, because we look for certain personality types while hiring. And the funnel from which we hire is a funnel which has lesser women. The classical STEM graduates going into MBA, coming into private equity, as it is, makes the pool very, very small. And within that pool, then we start applying the merit. And when we put the merit, there is this lens which we say we want to see these super confident, in the interviews, people coming out and making bolder statements, bigger statements, and we like to see that confidence coming through, and we put case studies which are heavy on numbers, and we expect the person to perform. So many times I have told the youngsters in the team who run the recruitment processes to actually go out and tell them, 19-20 hai to 19 hire karo, which is the woman, because the lens you're using is wrong, not because I want a compromise hire. So I think we have to re-examine the lenses. How are we evaluating? And being equal doesn't mean having the exact same lens. It is defining what are the properties you're looking for and not how those are manifested when you're meeting a person in an interview or conducting a case study. I think that we need to go back and examine it again and again and again for ourselves. Even in a company like ours, which has fair number of senior women, when I start looking for it, I find these biases manifesting themselves.
Yes, Nithya, thanks for sharing so much information on what are these biases, and that's why I said that is it only merit based or are there notional biases, and some of them may not be well founded as well in today's day and age when women are also so career oriented. Nupur Garg, I want to come to you on what are the findings of the participation of women. I think Nupur has dropped off. So, Visa, can I come to you for this one? How is the overall scenario, and are women considered good leaders, or is there a notional bias in that particular aspect? Because we do find women, staying on the job in the middle. They have their own life cycle also to deal with. But as far as the leadership qualities are concerned, is there a bias there?
So, no, thanks, Nisha. First of all, wishing everybody a very happy Women's Day. I think it's fantastic to be here. Talking about bias, I think when you look at the industry that we are in, I think we need to understand that we are relatively at a younger phase of evolution in this industry. The industry itself is probably less than 3 decades old. And this is where we see that there is an opportunity to actually pivot to a stage where we can actually show the other industries that, rather than increasing gender diversity on a step-by-step basis, can we actually think of moving to a situation where there can potentially be, some form of equality, neutrality, etc. And I think if that thinking, and I loved what Nithya said, right? If there is a little bit of a 90-20 difference, can we think a little out of box and push that particular thing? So coming to your aspect on gender, on bias, yes, it is there, right? It is there in a very, very different way. It's not an issue with respect to capability. It's not an issue with respect to, I think, competence, skill, intelligence, you name it, creativity, being a cheerleader, etc. But somewhere along the line, I think there are I think hundreds of issues that women face as part, and there's no single one issue that one can point out, right? And several of these together at a certain point could potentially eat into a confidence level, could potentially bring down, what you say, it can actually result in some kind of a conflict where, women tend to think that should I actually move out of the workforce? So these are the thinkings that come to your mind as a woman during the course, and especially when you're in the middle management at the juncture. So and it is at that point in time when you find that your support system is also pretty ad hoc. It's not something which is a very, very I would say structured support system. Yes, you will have support system at all points of time, but it's not something that you can actually go and freely ask for a certain support system. So I think the entire process of the way in which a woman moves up the curve, right? All that is, at every journey, it is filled with some bias or the other. And I don't fault this to saying that it's actually a gender bias, but these could be various issues that one is facing in the entire career journey. So clearly it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed in a structured format. And kudos to Nupur for what she is doing with respect to WinPE and the kind of bringing this entire thing at the forefront in terms of trying to improve. But if at all there is one industry that has an opportunity to actually sort of pivot to a level where you can actually think of gender neutral, because there's a young industry where there are not lakhs of people that are there. There are it's a few thousands of it's unlike, say, a commercial banking sector where you have lakhs of employees working, etc., where you need to employ several people. But here yeah, the industry is young and there's a great opportunity.
Right. So very, very important points made there, and moving up the curve, and also a structural approach in terms of the solution. Nupur, what are the findings of the report? Where do we stand now? We met before the pandemic hit us in a very big event that was organized by WinPE, and that was centered around women in private equity industry. Now, how do you see this? Are things changing for good?
Thank you, Nisha. And it was a pleasure having you at the launch of WinPE, which is the event you're referring to. And I must wish everybody a very happy International Women's Day. Although at WinPE, we sort of say we are thinking of gender diversity every day, and for us, every day is Women's Day. So this year, we've actually we are talking about the men who are working on gender diversity 365 days a year. Shashank is the first industry leader that we featured. So I think this is a fantastic panel. We've got people who are all aligned in saying how important diversity is, and how it yields better decisions. In terms of the report that we just wrote with BCG, I think the findings are not surprising. They are not very different from what we would have already known or seen in other reports on the same topic. And I have to caution that there is probably a self-selection bias among the firms that participated in this particular survey, because it was not anonymous, right? So clearly these were firms who believe in diversity, who put forward their data, who make the effort to give 4 years worth of data. Numbers are similar, slightly higher than global benchmarks. Entry level is showing a lot of improvement. I think that was one of the best findings, where we saw that entry level diversity ratios are close to 40%, which is quite reflective of the talent pool that the industry is hiring from. So when you look at women in STEM, women from B schools, those percentages, depending on which country you're looking at, which college you're looking at, range between 40 to 45%, and sometimes even close to 50%. So given that the industry, or at least our sample size, is showing an entry level diversity of 39%, I think is a great sign of progress. I think the fact that we had people participate in this survey and give us data, and in numbers that made for a sample that was worth analyzing itself, is a huge sign of progress, right? People are stepping up and saying we need to spend time and resources in thinking about diversity. I think another thing that the report found was a number of things that we frequently discuss in terms of being effective in retaining women. A lot of the firms are already working on. So, the usual flexi work, flexi hours, thinking about gender sensitization, thinking about, what is the culture of the firm. A lot of these things are already under progress. The big gaps, if I say, that we found, and, the big gaps that clearly signal the opportunity for us to work on, is taking this entry level 39% all the way to the top, because at the top we're still at 7%. So if you just think about the amount of talent the industry is losing, is incredible. And as I say, the industry needs to lower its tolerance for losing talent, in the journey to the top. Some of the other interesting findings, that even within this concentrated sample set, we had roughly 2/3 firms which were all men. So even when firms are thinking about gender diversity as being important, we had 60% firms which are all men. So just thinking about it, is not important. It is a great beginning, but clearly we need to move forward and start translating that thought into action. And hopefully at WinPE, we are going to start, seeing more of that, and we are, working with firms and catalyzing action around that. Um, the other thing that came out very interestingly was the whole juxtaposition between what is it that firms think is going to be efficient and effective in retaining women, and what women think is going to work. And one thing that comes out very, very clearly is that women believe that just talking about gender diversity, just the sensitization and maybe unconscious bias trainings by themselves are not enough. And that is also confirmed by global research, which actually has said that if you have unconscious bias training, but you don't follow it up with action, then it's probably going to, have a negative impact on the firm. So women are sort of saying it's not enough to just talk about it.
No,
it's not enough to
just
say we
lip
are aware.
service, and we need solutions which are actionable, and each one of you can come up with solutions which I'll come to you for. But two things stand out, Nupur, from what you said, that the gaps, first of all, the cultural mindset of an organization, and the second one is that lower tolerance for losing talent, because you have invested in your employees, women employees, and after that, losing that talent on the journey to the top is also one of the expenses on the organization. So, Shashank, you heard everybody around, and thankfully, all the women are now vocal about this bias. They will not say it, but let me, as an outsider, say it, that private equity industry is considered a boys' club. Now, how do you change that? And I want to ask you a specific question which women can also introspect. Is there a clear distinction in the male, risk-taking ability and female risk-taking ability? And that's why private equity industry may not have as many women on the top.
Yeah. Both good questions, Nisha. Why don't I take a crack at both? Let me start with the second one first, and I think this also speaks to some of the points that Shivani made earlier. Look, private equity is not a risk-taking business; it's a risk management business. Because at the end of the day, our investors reward us. There's a balance between risk and reward. If you take too much risk, you're going to lose every single company. You will make a lot of donuts, right? You will lose money. It's about taking calibrated risk and managing that. And I find, and to the point that Shivani made, at least as my personal opinion, you need to balance, you need to understand what risk you're taking and also mitigate around it. And to Shivani's point, the more diversity of thought you have around it, the better investment outcome, better investment judgment you come to. And I mean, speaking for Apex, 8 or 10 years ago, we sort of looked at ourselves and we said, look, the gender sort of through the gender lens, the diversity in the firm at Apex was dreadful. And we said, we're going to change this. And we didn't do it because we said, look, we're doing it altruistically. We did it because we felt it was going to end up leading to better returns. Exactly the statistic Shivani talked about. And indeed, that has turned out to be the case. If you look at our, as our gender diversity has gone up, our returns have also improved the last 10 years. Now, is that correlation or causation? I don't know. But certainly my own feeling is there is definitely an aspect to that. So it's not about, can men take risk better, women not so. I think it's a very stereotypical thinking. I wouldn't agree with it. To the other question you asked, look, is it a boys' club? How does it work, etc.? I mean, I think my women co-panelists who frankly have faced this they're all very, very successful women at the top of their careers and firms. They have faced this over many decades of their careers around unconscious biases, hidden biases. Nithya gave the example. We faced exactly the same thing. 4 years ago, we had 0 women at Apex in India. I'm not talking about Apex globally, just the Apex team in India. And we made a conscious choice. We're going to change it.
Yes.
Because every process we went through, the men were hiring, and we had women in the interview. I mean, in the funnel, and as close to equal representation as we could get.
Yes.
But in the end, the finalists in the interviews were always men. And I kind of questioned, and I sort of said, how can this be? It doesn't make any sense. So we said, we're going to break the mold. Finally, the first woman, the way we hired it, I told the team, look, I'm very happy for you to have anyone you want in the panel as long as it's a woman.
Right.
And actually, the woman who came out of that is the top performer at our firm.
So, Shashank, at what level have you hired most of the women since last 4 years that you have gone on gender diversity?
It's been, to Nupur's point, it's been at entry and at mid-ranking.
Yes.
And by the way, that is also a policy, that's a firm view, which is, look, the industry is an apprentice-based industry.
Right.
And you if you hire a partner, the likelihood as a partner,
right,
the likelihood that they will succeed can be quite low. So it's a question of growing women through the firm. And to your point, it's not just about hiring, it's then about retaining and making sure you support women through their career.
Right. Shashank, let me interrupt you there. Nupur has to drop off, but final words from Nupur then on the aspect that, since it's a newer industry, we don't have many leaders right now. And that's the problem that you had spoken about in the past also. What is the solution right now that you would suggest to really bridge this mismatch? One, and entry level hiring would create leaders of the future. So that's a positive bit.
Yeah, thank you. I have a slightly controversial response to that, and I'll be blunt about it. I would say that we've always had women at the entry level. It's not that this is a, first time. Maybe they were not 39%, maybe they were just 20%, but they were there. And the industry hasn't been able to translate that into adequate numbers of women at leadership levels. So I don't think it's only about saying we fix the entry funnel, so we'll be fine in 10 years from now. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in retaining this talent. Some of the things that the report found women worry about is that even if you have, say, for example, flexi work, maternity benefits policies, etc., how does the firm respond to a woman using those policies, or what is the perception that a woman carries about the response that she'll get when she uses a policy? I mean, we've had interviews, we've had conversations with women who said that the boss came to know she was going to get married. She was asked to send an email confirming that she will not move cities and she will not quit for the next 2 years. And this happens in today's world in the PVC industry, right? So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in debiasing the industry. And yes, I think gender sensitization is an important part, but I think from the top management, you need to set the tone in terms of culture, in terms of making sure that women are being included in every team. They're being able to participate. It's not only about having a seat at the table, it's also about having a voice. So just calling out to them, making sure they're heard, making the career graph more objective, more transparent, and not just saying that, do I think that she did a good job, or do the metrics show that our employees did a good job? That is a transition that needs to happen. Another thing that women rated very highly was pay parity, which I believe almost every industry sector is a little distant from. And how pay parity is one of the most valuable things when it comes to retaining women. I think women in leadership, there are many ways of going about it. Even if you can't do it immediately within your firm, you can think about lateral hiring. You can think about bringing senior leadership in your portfolio companies, women on boards, women at CXO levels, right? It's an ecosystem. You can think about talking to your advisors in bringing senior women on. So I think there is a lot of work, but we are on the way.
No,
and
thanks,
I
Nupur,
look
for bringing
forward
about
to a different
so many
conversation
important points,
soon.
especially the point on lateral hiring. Now, private equity industry is known for out-of-the-box thinking, and many, leaders have been from different walks of life and have done fabulously well, but they are all men. Why can't the same, lens be used
Nithya is
for
a
women
lateral
hiring
hire.
for lateral? Because this
Nithya in
includes
the panel
many
is a
different
lateral
types of
hire.
skill sets, which can be from various other industries as well. So that there I have seen a clear bias, I as an outsider. And another aspect that I've seen is that many private equity players Now the senior leadership is going overboard in entry level hiring for women because their metrics on the overall level between men and women looks much better. Thanks, Nupur, and she'll
Thank
drop
you.
off, but we'll continue
Yeah.
the
Bye-bye.
conversation. And Nithya, where lies the issue? Do you think that politics also has a lot to do? Because at senior levels, it's not just your performance, it's also whom you align with, and also politics and collaborating, and that also plays a very important part in decision making and pushing through the agenda of certain big employees, and also creating leaders of tomorrow. Do you think that women lag behind in playing that political game, or men somewhere do not trust women with that politics?
Yeah, I've made this controversial statement before to say women shouldn't run away from politics. And the moment we say politics, it evokes a very negative feeling. And, my own natural feeling would be to say, why bother about about politics? But I would define politics a little widely. Politics is essentially understanding the formal and informal networks that operate within each organization, and to align those networks. We cannot say that opportunities are going to be offered in a platter, and that's what I mentor people in the team, as well as anybody else who reaches out, to say that you have to want to be the leader. How much can the industry just push you? You need to bootstrap yourself up. So engage beyond what the role is, understand what the undercurrents, what the informal networks are, align them positively. Playing politics does not mean bringing someone else down to pull yourself up. It could just be to align all the energies of the universe behind you, but you need to take the effort to do that. So yes, definitely, and I think that is changing now. So women need to say yes to leadership as well, and I think from the organization side, the culture of empathy needs to be there within each firm. I think for me, the big aha moment came when one of our senior male colleagues came to me and said, "Treat me like the mother." And that's when we figured that at least in our organization, it's okay to have this conversation. And I think that's something we need to encourage, and have that empathy as people pass through various phases of life. I think the biggest problem, and just commenting on Nupur's thing, that 60% of firms are still fully men, and to break that jinx, one is, of course, women. You want to hire women. Women should want to be in your firm. It's equally so. It's both ways. Women should want to be in your firm. And I think to break that, sometimes it's good to just hire laterally and show that.
So Nithya, male employees get a pat on the back if for their kids, exams, they have to take leave. And if women do that, it's considered a restriction. That's a well-known fact. But Padmaja, how to, look for solutions? We can talk about the problems, but how can women themselves empower other women to sustain through the different cycles, and also balance between life as well as work, and continue on their ambitious path?
No, it's a good question, Nisha. And let me share with you what we try and do, just to give you a little bit of a grounds view. Is we do have young mothers who actually got married and delivered babies while they were working with us. And what really worked for us is we sort of came together as 2 or 3 people in the senior team, both comprising of women and men, and sort of supported to say that how you're going to go through this, how would your work get distributed during the critical periods, and what could we do to make it easier for you, number one. And that conversation led to something which we didn't think would happen. Is the lady who was going through this, she came up with questions on how she could get similar support at home. And I think this reach out actually helped her to have communications at home, to say, she has responsibilities at home, and how that can get distributed. So I think just creating that environment of support, of empathy, of just a reach out. You would have anyway, you go through this, and it's not easy anyway. So why not just make it easier and reach out? And I think communication did help in a lot of way. And you also gave a confidence to her that it's okay, within 2 months, things will be better, as she goes through the critical periods. So I think this is something which, if we can build into the culture of organizations, of communicating, empathy, sensitivity, and just being there, nothing more, also just being there, that I'm there to just pick up wherever you are, I think it goes a long way. And it actually, as I said, Nisha, we didn't realize ourselves, but it sort of spilled over into her home life. And I think we felt good, just as a collateral, that it helped a little bit
So,
more.
Shivani, let me take off from where Padmaja left. Now, pandemic has made us all very humane, even at workplace. With you sitting here, behind you, the kids are roaming around. You can take a break to tell your cook what to make. So while men and women both are doing this, do you think that there'll be more acceptance of women really balancing home as well as work front equally well?
Absolutely, Nisha. And I'm going to make a couple of slightly controversial comments here, so bear with me. First, I think the whole, oh my God, the woman is going to take, some maternity leave thing is completely overplayed, especially in the context of our industry. Our industry is a very long-term thinking industry. We invest over a cycle, we then harvest exits. The best funds are usually those that retain their employees over a long period of time. So if as a fund manager, as a private equity manager, I'm hiring talent, I am thinking about a decadal hire. If I'm thinking about at least a decadal hire, if this individual, male or female, needs to take 3 months, 6 months, or even 9 months off, it's no big deal. So I think, first of all, we should stop that narrative, and we should stop asking women this question about how they will manage home and work. I would like to stop that, right? It's not a big deal. It can happen. We've done it. It will happen. It can happen. Okay. The second thing that I think is important to bring out, and I think it's been brought out in bits and pieces, and I'd like to pull it together a little bit, is we talk about entry level hires being 40%. Wow. And then abysmal numbers at the top, right? 7, 8, 9%, whatever that number is. Now, what I want to highlight is, and when you talk about these things and you talk about gender diversity, you imagine it's this terrible thing that a woman was not hired, or there was one great injustice. But in reality, now again, we are investors, so we understand better than anybody the power of compounding, or the power of cumulative small things, which often go to make great investments, right? So in my opinion, it's the cumulative small things which add up to the hidden biases. And I read a brilliant New York Times article recently, which I would sort of recommend to everyone. It was by this author called Jessica Nordell, and I'm an economist by heart, so I love this kind of stuff. But she did a computer simulation with a computer science professor from the University of Buffalo. And they actually ran a simulation on hidden biases, right? So they named this company Norm Corp, like normal corporation. And where a man and a woman start off the same, and then there are many, many little things that happen to the woman. It's not one big thing. It's a little oversight. It's just a little less pay. It's just a little less, just less. But every day, every week, every month, every year. Okay. And
right,
guess what?
Shivani.
Yeah. So the man gets promoted, to partner within 4 years, and the equally competent woman who starts along with him takes 8 years. So in my opinion, a lot of this is happening, right?
So, Shivani, this is not just particular to a private equity industry.
No, not at all.
This happens in the corporate world.
Yes.
Visalakshi, if private equity industry itself is not managing the gender diversity as well, how do you push that agenda in your portfolio companies? Do we need specific impact-based, ESG-based funds to really push that mandate of gender diversity, or should it be taken over by everybody?
We need it in every fund, and we need it at the top. And we cannot wait for the funnel to grow and for us to hire, and then all these people to work beautifully together.
That's a very long haul process. I think
too long.
We all are dead.
We need the change now.
Visalakshi, pointed question. How would you justify pushing that agenda in your portfolio companies if the industry itself is not managing that equally well?
So I think before talking of portfolio companies, I would say I'm very proud of the fact that in our fund, 50% of our investing and operating team are actually women. So and this is something I'm personally proud, and I think the entire team is proud of. Unfortunately, though, we've invested in like a dozen portfolio companies. None of them have women founders, but at the same time, there are spouses of the men founders who have taken directorships, etc. And I would love to, witness a day, at least during my investing experience, where the husband is actually the director and the woman is actually the founder of the company. So this is something I'm hoping to see in some of our portfolio companies. Having said that, not at an ownership level, you don't have, you literally, at least in our experience, we don't have women founders. But there are, I think, the industry that we deal with, healthcare and life sciences, this is an industry with an enormous number of women. In fact, out of all the industries, this is probably one industry that stands out in terms of some kind of a gender balance, right? You look at the shop floor, at the R&D, at the quality control, at various hospitals, etc. You will find that the gender balance is quite there. But unfortunately, it is not there at the top level. And this is something I think one can do in a very gradual way. It can't be done overnight, in a very gradual way, where you try and think of, maybe women independent directors, maybe women advisors, etc. So that's one way. But net, I would say at the end of the day, be it our fund management industry, be it our portfolio companies, I think it's very important to increase the informal funnel of shortlist. Only so right now your 39% at the entry level is as it goes up,
I
it
got
goes
your
to
point, Nisha, but we are running out of time. And
yes, Nisha, I think that's why they sent me back here.
How to decimate the unconscious biases against women?
Nisha, I think we have time for one more question. So
I've incorporated the question from the audience, how to address this unconscious bias against women. Shashank.
I think, Nisha, in our industry, we say if you don't measure it, you're not going to manage to it. And so the approach we have done is we are going to present all of this data, effectively make it public, and present it to our most important constituency, which is our LPs, our investors. We report on it every 6 months, and there are 4 or 5 metrics we report: women in the investment team, women at senior positions in the investment team, women CEOs, women senior executives, CXOs, and women directors in our portfolio companies. And we measure this every 6 months. And then that forces the thinking to say, well, what do you need to do to continue to manage each of these metrics, including unconscious bias, of course, hiring women in the funnel and at the early stage, but also making sure that they stay with you, they grow in their careers, and they succeed. Also in portfolio companies, also with women directors on boards, also with women senior executives. But it does take time. I don't think there's a shortcut. I think if everyone's conscious, to the point Shivani made, if everyone's conscious, and equally the positive cycle is if there's lots of small things that you're focused on fixing, ultimately the end result will be positive.
Very, very positive note there, Shashank, coming from a leader in the private equity industry, and all of you women from the private equity industry really spoke your heart out when it comes to the bias, and it was a very, very candid discussion, and that's where the solutions start to begin, when we openly discuss the problems in a particular area. So I'm very glad that we got so many important points on the table, and it will get a lot of people thinking, and there will be a solution-based approach. Remember that private equity has a lot of money, and money speaks. So if you force that in your investee companies, to look at gender diversity as an important aspect of sustainability that will ring the bell with the companies who want your money as well. Thank you so much, everybody. And with that, I thank
Thanks,
IVCA
Nisha.
for giving me the
Thank you,
opportunity.
everyone.
Thank you.
It was a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.